Great. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are surviving this horrible pandemic that we're in. Hopefully we're making progress out there, but it is a trying time, but I think society is working hard, including the communications area, to overcome these challenges. My name is Chris Pearson. I am the president of 5G Americas, and we are very fortunate to have four really tremendous panelists today to discuss 5G in the public square. And what a time to be talking about this. There's probably never a time in our history where, the number one application for all of us, whether it's work, home, school, you name it, is to be connected. And that connectivity is so important to the world right now. And today we're lucky to have four tremendous panelists, as I mentioned, to give us their viewpoint on 5G in the public square. So today we're going to start out, just kind of give you a feel for it, is we're going to start out with some short introductions from each of the panelists, and then we're going to move into a panel discussion of basically questions and answers that I have for each of the panelists about various things. Additionally, I want to remind you that you can enter questions of yourself that we can address from the audience by using the Q&A button that's on your screen. So with that, that's the format. We're really looking forward to it at 5G Americas. And again, I'm going to start out with what I would call a fairly brief, just introductions from each of the panelists about who they are, and what they do, and anything they'd want to comment on, just in like a 90 seconds opening introduction. So with that, the first introduction I would like to have would be Professor Jim Flink from the University of Missouri.
Chris, thank you so much. I am here as part of the MU Institute for Experiential Education, Innovation, and Entrepreneurism. We've been partnering with AT&T really for the better part of 2 years. We started with an interdisciplinary course where we had students from 4 different disciplines looking at issues like campus safety, healthcare, sports and esports, and campus curriculum. We have since built a 5G millimeter wave studio that will be going online just in a matter of days. We've just got to flip the switch over at the True-Last College of Business. This fall, we will launch 4 new courses in mental health, business, biomedical engineering, and journalism. And we're also partnering with several early emerging growth companies in our entrepreneurism arm, as well as our research arm, to look at 5G as well.
Great. Thanks for that introduction. Next, I would like Dr. Philip Neufeld of the Fresno Unified School District to introduce himself to everybody.
Thanks, Chris. Phil Neufeld. I'm Executive Officer of Information Technology, responsible for enterprise services, core infrastructure, personalized learning, and analytics. We've got about 70,000 students within an urban area. And while we'll say it's high in poverty, it's also rich in human assets when we create the opportunities for students to realize their potential. We're bringing a multi-layered approach to solve for internet access that's equitable, that includes dark leased fiber, wireline broadband, private LTE, and hotspots. And we'll talk more about why is a school district building its own private cellular network.
Great. No, we look forward to that discussion. Next, if I could have Chris Smith of AT&T provide us an introduction.
Thanks, Chris. Happy to be here with Jim and Phil and the entire panel. I hope everybody's doing well out there across the country. This is truly an exciting topic with just a lot of promise for the nation across the board. I'm looking forward to diving into the details on it. I serve as the Vice President for Technology for our public sector business within AT&T, focused in on state, local governments, as well as education, K through 12 universities, as well as our federal government and international governments around the world.
Super. Thank you for that. And next, I want to have Ray Sabrin of Nokia introduce himself and any opening comments.
Hi, Ray Sabrin. I'm head of business development for our private wireless division, focused on what we call emerging vertical markets, and education being one of them. Though I have to say, it's no longer an emerging market after the activities that occurred after COVID. We've definitely seen this as a maturing vertical for private wireless, be it 4G or 5G, and we see the future of how 5G can really make a difference in that vertical.
All right. And Ray, I love your home office. I wish I could get one just like that.
By the way, this is not a backdrop. This is actually
it's just amazing. Where are you at?
This is where we have to do our webinars. Yeah.
Where are you at? You're obviously at Nokia site, correct?
Yeah, this is our executive briefing center, and it's kind of funny because this is where customers used to come see all the different equipment we had, do some trials, proof of concepts. But now it's all virtual, so I'm alone in this big room right now. Somebody's in the background making sure it all works. But
yeah, well, like I said,
definitely different in my home office.
But anyway, so let's. That's again an introduction of our panel. I appreciate everyone being brief and to the point. And now we really want to move into some of the the questions I have on really what is going on in this space and how are you great experts thinking about it. And I'm going to start with a question for Professor Flink or Jim or whatever you want me to call you. How is Missouri thinking about this issue of 5G development via the academic coursework or research, and what are you doing, and how is it going to impact what you're doing at a university level, but even beyond that?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are so many ways where this is really impactful, and you can look across the campus and you can see, in our health centers like emergency room nurses, life flight helicopters that need to speak to physicians, and they've taken their life flight helicopter out, and now they need to communicate something with the physician back at the hospital, and they need to have that 5G connectivity. Or you can look at campus safety in a parking garage, and a student, it's 2 a.m. She's going from her study room back to her car, and being able to have real-time information that's being monitored. The kinds of applications are really amazing in an on-campus environment, let alone the academic environment, which is really rich. We are looking particularly at areas like mental health, where using mobility, mobile devices, 5G and connectivity, the ability to provide timeouts and to provide mental health and wellness sorts of exercises in real time, that kind of thing is rich. You look at the ability to do remote surgeries and to talk about having a physician in one place teaching students that are in another location, and the ability with 5G to be able to do real-time interactive kinds of things. The richness and the possibilities of this expand across the spectrum. They really allow for exponential learning and vertical learning.
Right. So you're doing it from both providing it as academic opportunity for your students, at the same time doing research, and at the same time doing deployments. Is that right?
Correct. And in the MU Institute, we have really three arms. We have the academic arm. So that's creating coursework, real-time coursework for both our residential and our distance learners. We have research, where we're really entering in with everything from multinational corporations to small and emergent growth startups, where they're trying to enrich experiences or really predict the future and the present, and to be able to use the expanded bandwidth of 5G to be able to innovate. And then we've got the research arm, which is what universities do so well, and really leveraging researchers who are looking at everything from highway safety to building usage patterns, and to really be able to create rich experiences with real-time data, and really to enrich people's experiences and to enhance them in real time.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. I'm going to move on, because I think, if I looked at, the Fresno Unified School District and communicating a bit with Dr. Neufeld, I mean, I'm sure everyone there wants to, I don't know if they want to go to the University of Missouri, but they definitely want to progress themselves from an education standpoint, go to college someday. And you are looking at really this issue of, in 2020, which was, you mentioned, Dr. Neufeld, the homework gap, and that it was there in 2020. Yeah. And so, how can we work? Maybe you could explain that homework gap.
Sure.
And then how do we prevent that from happening when we're in 2030?
So first of all, Professor Flink did a great job helping us reimagine what education is about and what students are heading into, both in higher education, but also the workforce. So students in higher socioeconomic situations, they've had access to greater access to digital resources for the past 10, 30 years. COVID pulled the Band-Aid off what I'll call the wound of digital access in our country, right? And as school districts, we found hotspots that didn't work well in areas of higher poverty, nor was wireline broadband sufficiently available or affordable. The business drivers, and I think Professor Flink laid them out well, but there are changes in education, in K-12, higher ed, but there's shifts in learning and teaching where there's increased and more effective use of digital resources. Understanding that learning occurs in school and beyond the school. And then there's the high leverage learning practices like place-based and problem-based learning. There's also, as I mentioned, the limitations on local services in terms of cell services and wireline broadband. But an important piece here that we don't want to walk past is students need ubiquitous mobility. Students need internet access, not just in the schools, but beyond, not just in their housing units, but in the local areas around them. So we've got the opportunity to build out the private, public, and shared infrastructure, fiber, LTE, 5G, wireline broadband, or better internet ecosystem where all students have access to digital resources. This should be available, as I mentioned, across where students move throughout their day. And so we're pleased to be working with NetSync, Nokia on the build-out of our private LTE network using CBRS spectrum. And I think we can all agree that better access supports students being more prepared for the world that Dr. Flink was talking about, but also participating and contributing to society. So let's make sure, as part of this conversation, that we reimagine the future and how we might, public, private, and the public square, invest in ways that are more inclusive, but with a richer internet ecosystem so that as a country, we thrive because we've taken care of all neighborhoods.
Right. And when you talk about the broader, providing for everybody in your school district, and some of the examples that you use, you're actually, it's kindergarten through 12, right?
Exactly.
You have, and how many students do you have in you?
We've got about 74,000 students, and you're absolutely right. It's the teaching has changed across the board. Now, we've been working on this change in our district for about 5 years and beyond. But the key thing is students are now ready for it, and when they get these new learning opportunities, they thrive. They seize them and they do well with them, as long as we've created the right infrastructure in those neighborhoods so they can access that kind of learning.
Yeah. And let me go back to Professor Flink. How many, I should know this already because we've communicated via email, but how many students and faculty is on your Missouri campus probably in general?
I would put the number at about 30,000 and plus some faculty and staff, so probably in the low 30s. But I think what Dr. Neufeld just pointed out is another arm of what we're doing with 5G and with AT&T, and that is really reaching out to our constituents in the state of Missouri and building partnerships for outstate alliance. Outside of what we're doing at the Institute, we also have a pilot program that we're working with AT&T on, like in Bollinger County, Missouri, where we're also trying to sort of spread the digital divide and really to be able to close that gap.
Yeah, close that gap. I like that word.
I'll mention on closing that gap, Chris, is we're also monitoring internet connectivity using an app we built because we want to make sure we've got the right response to that student who doesn't have the connection they need or that neighborhood that needs more support. So we want to make sure we're collecting data to figure out where do we need to do better and how do we invest anchor institutions, in partnership with private entities to bring them so every one of our students can participate in the kind of learning that we're talking about.
Right. In fact, that brings me, we're opening up a bunch of great questions, but I do want to go to, you mentioned partnerships and things like that. And when you think about University of Missouri or a school district, those are very much serving the greater good of society in my mind. But I want to bring in folks that maybe are looking at the partnership to provide the capabilities and so forth. So I want to first bring in, Chris, in your company, AT&T, they've been seeing success in campus deployments. Can you give us or share some of your insight about, what are some of the examples that you're seeing from AT&T Point that are use cases and initiatives that the deployments will enable? Maybe you can kind of discuss that because we have two live examples of people doing great things, but I want to hear AT&T people.
Yeah, very happy to do that. And I thought I might just add to my colleagues' comments there, right? I mean, the digital divide is too great in this country. When you look at the economy and the quality of life that we all expect to have, I think it's extraordinarily important that we continue to close that. COVID, no greater event to show, right? Well, almost 100 million people went home over a month-long period, right? I mean, in the government, in the federal government, almost 1 million people went home overnight. There's some 50 million odd students out there from K through 12 up in universities working from home, right? There's about 140 million taxpayers out there. How many of those individuals, at least 50 to 60% probably went home by conservative estimates. So overnight, we had 100 million people at home. And those that didn't have that access were really disadvantaged, right? So we're critically focused on that, just as my colleagues are. I think the numbers are somewhere around 50 million households that don't have broadband speed in the country. And when you start looking at students, some 17 million. So we're fully committed to closing that gap. And I hope that there's opportunity within these infrastructure packages that are going through to also do that as well, because that ought to be something that people have availability to, because what we're talking about here is truly immersive and contextual based activities when we talk about 5G, right? I think we quickly look back at LTE and we like to use the word disruption in the technology circles, but the changes that came at us, right, were just staggering. You used to carry around a calculator, a watch, a GPS, a camera, a flashlight, and LTE in the smartphone, right, when we increase capacity, and some in the 3G space as well, right? That's all on this device right here, or, a tablet. And so the expectations for 5G, I think, are even greater. I mean, there's no doubt about it, right? We're talking about, we talk about the millimeter wave, the kind of the most capacity with the least latency, is where it gets very, very interesting. But already today, when you look at our footprint, I think we're some 240 million people that'll be covered out there with 5G speeds at the macro cell level. But again, let's go into that millimeter wave space that I think where a lot of us are talking about, where on a campus, for instance, a quad being lit up, right? And you think about tens of thousands of students being able to do extraordinary research and development in that space, being able to, entertain themselves in a way that we never have before, right? My colleagues have talked a little bit about augmented reality, virtual reality, the capabilities there, and the use cases are they just go on and on. I think we've only started to scrape the surface. So just to, real quickly, so we can get to others, some of the things that we're seeing across are the customers that we have, adding in the university space. We've seen the University of Miami kind of take that millimeter wave capability into those squad spaces and do things with organizations like Dreamscape in the augmented reality space. And the interesting thing about Dreamscape is, you think about the Oculus, the goggles where you can't see, Dreamscapes where you actually have kind of visual acuity around what's going on, or situational awareness, while you're also being in this immersive space. And they're doing interesting things with art in particular, right? Someone may not get an opportunity to go to the Louvre, for instance. So the ability to see these, these masterpieces up front and personal. I know they were doing some stuff with the Smithsonian that I was very amazed in how, right, one of the buildings going to be opened on the mall here for the first time in probably 30 years, and some of the things they were doing there. But imagine that, right? That's kind of on the entertainment and learning side. Take it into health, right? And the ability to have a 3D image that a surgeon and the team can go through and look at the pathogens and look at the things that they're looking for and have better outcomes for the individual, right? And I think last thing I'll say, right, is I just touched on Miami, but this University of Connecticut has a great announcement out there doing things around entrepreneurial opportunities and innovation in their space. One of my favorites, and one that I'm very close to, is the Naval Postgraduate School. So when we think about advanced graduate education for our military personnel, the Navy and other uniformed services can go through this, and it's focused on master's and PhD and a lot of applied research. We're working with them to light up what's called the Sea, Land, Air Military Research Initiative. And that's basically any autonomous vehicle under the water, on top of the water, in the land, air, and space, and all of the telematics, command and control that go on with that. How do you onload and offload data? How do you start to introduce machine learning and artificial intelligence in the command and control of these? I mean, again, this is a very generative technology in that it's interesting in its own right, but it's the applications that are going to be developed on top of this ecosystem. So I've said more than enough for my little bit here, but just really excited about the opportunities for us as a nation here.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think you brought up some great things, and I think the pandemic did, kind of basically force us into this grand experiment of how well we can actually function in education, in work, everything. It's actually been very interesting to see. It was like almost obviously a forced experiment, as they would say. But let me move on. I got lots of questions for everybody, but let me move on. I do want to get Ray, Ray's viewpoint from his side. It was, we've heard a little bit about what's going on at the University of Missouri and also at the Fresno Unified School District and even at AT&T, some of the things that they're doing. But what would you say, Ray, are some of the kind of business drivers for educational institutions that you're working with, to basically to really move the ball along, whether it's a private LTE 5G network or to work with an operator to help run a network slice or anything like that? What do you feel are some of the business drivers for educational institutions?
Well, right now, because of the COVID incidents and the digital divide, the homework gap, the first focus has been to just bring broadband to the constituents from K through 12. So that's been the focus. And by the way, we're working with the carriers as well, SIs and different. And that's what I think is very exciting right now, and why I think we're seeing more advancement is this mix of, going from 4G to 5G. And then there's going from licensed to unlicensed. CBRS being introduced into the U.S., it's one of the best things the FCC has ever done. I mean, the ecosystem that was built there in the time, and then we look at other spectrum like EBS or 4.9, and nothing happened in those spectrum. There's a reason, because CBRS got opened up, and it's this use it or share it model that really exploded the market. And now we're seeing innovation. We're seeing better use of, I start thinking about universities, the kind of conversation we were having 2 years ago compared to now. Now it's like what we were just talking about on this call. It's all this innovation, but also business models are changing. Some universities are now looking at their campus holistically and going, wait, I don't need a cable company to bring content. And the kids don't watch cable anyways. It's a pure pipe. They want the pipe, and then maybe we can add content to it. And then they look at, the blue phones being eliminated because they're cutting the copper and saying, well, I'm not just going to put a blue phone now. I'm going to put an interactive, digital billboard. And by the way, it could be also a revenue stream for me. I could start putting advertising on there. And it's like that in their stadiums. This is the part I like about what I do. Since I work in emerging markets, I hear all these concepts and ideas, and look, they're coming to us and going, hey, we're thinking about doing that. Is it possible? What's what are my limitations? And a lot of use cases right now are really not a challenge for the connectivity. And then you think of where we are in 5G's growth or maturity. We're just at the beginning. I mean, it's going to go, and I'm actually looking for the market to put demand on us, the OEMs, because right now, I think we're ahead of the technology a little bit from a standpoint of what we can do in a bubble. I'm not saying, hey, across the country, globally, Nokia is going to put a site on the moon. We're not there yet, but we're getting there. But this is the kind of stuff that I find is exciting. And the business drivers, the basic ones are, I need connectivity, lower costs really, because, looking at private networks or looking at 5G, it may be more cost efficient than trying to deploy, 250 Wi-Fi APs. Or cutting the wire. Now that there's the trust about security, because security is becoming more and more of a big issue in enterprise anyways. But then when we get past the security, the reliability, and the capability of the connectivity layer, then all of a sudden they're like, okay, well, I don't need Ethernet cables everywhere. Those cameras don't need to be run on Ethernet. Looking at even basic solutions like, I want wireless access in this parking lot, but running the cable to the parking lot and putting an outdoor Wi-Fi IP is too expensive. Well, now they're going to use, connectivity, be it LTE or 5G, connectivity back to their main IP network. So I find that there's a lot of business drivers, both from a cost saving, introducing new technology, but also even new revenue streams for a lot of these universities.
Yep. Yeah. Great. And for the audience, just a quick follow-up. You mentioned CBRS and what that is, and just in 30 seconds, or less. CBRS basically is a approach in mid-band spectrum where we have licensed, unlicensed, or licensed, shared, and unlicensed, and it's at a tier level and has various priorities. And we won't get into that. We could have a whole session on CBRS, but Ray mentioned that, so I just want to clarify what that was. But let's move this. We've kind of stepped into this idea on the panel here about what's going on in our world, in our universe, at different levels, both at AT&T, at Nokia, at Missouri, and at the school district in Fresno. So let me turn it over, and this is going to be a panelist question because I think we might get different viewpoints on this. But from where we are today with LTE, and as we see this progress of 5G, what would be, maybe I'll start with Jim, what would be the expectations of what happens as we move to 5G? What is it that, like, students and faculty, or even yourself, when you start to think about the capabilities of 5G, where does that lead you to as far as ideas and expectations? And I'm gonna put every panelist on the spot to kind of give me an answer on this. Hopefully, not too long of answers, but yeah, what are your expectations on 5G?
Well, thanks for putting me on the spot first. No, I'm just kidding. I think the first thing that you want to think about is accelerated learning and the ability to take, college coursework that used to take 4 years, and maybe you do it in 2, or maybe you even do it in 1, and you get stackable sorts of experiences. You think about teaching anatomy and the ability to, in an immersive setting, to be able to do a lesson that might have taken 4 or 6 weeks, and to be able to do it in 3 sessions, where you're looking at the endocrine system and the musculoskeletal system, or whatever it might be. I'm not a scientist, but I mean, you think about the ability to accelerate learning, and this wider pipe gives you the ability to have really enriched experiences, immersive experiences, to be able to actually have sort of in-person experiences that enrich the learning, accelerate it. Then, as a result of that, maybe what happens is every 5 years now, as a part of your education, you go and you do certificate programs, or you do, we have stackable certificates in the School of Business, whatever it might be, that really sort of bring you up to date. One of the things we're seeing a lot with journalists, public relation officials, and that type of thing is this ability to sort of refresh skills, right? And this technology is accelerating at such a pace that, in addition to stackably changing the way education rolls out, there's also going to need to be a refreshing sort of part of that. And so what we're doing is we're trying to imagine the future in the present and say, where are we going to be, not in 10 years, in 5 years, in 3 years, as a result of the acceleration.
Right. So you're already looking at harnessing some of those capabilities into use cases for your students, it sounds like, already for 5G.
Absolutely. And I think about healthcare, for instance, and one of the things that we're seeing is mental health has come to the forefront as the result of the pandemic. And what we're doing is we're having real-time discussions about how mobility and how our mobile phones can help enhance our mental health experiences. So just look at that and look at the ability for digiceuticals. So we have a local startup here, Helium, that we partner with on a number of different things. And the founder there has really sort of built out some of her relationships. And you think about the ability for your mobile phone to be a mental health timeout, and the ability to, in an immersive way, to put that in a headset, or to in other ways experience that. And that's pretty rich. And that has the same impact as some pharmaceuticals. That's pretty dynamic stuff that we don't have to wait on.
Oh, absolutely. That's great to hear. Okay, I'm going to move to Dr. Neufeld. In your viewpoint, what are your expectations? Here we are at LTE. It's a great technology, but we're progressing toward 5G. What are your expectations as someone that's in charge of the district? And you mentioned some great things that you're doing. What are your expectations on 5G?
So Professor Flink made some great points about accelerated learning. I'll add to that the potential of adaptive, ubiquitous learning in the moment that pays attention to the learner's strengths, skills, and passions, but also a term that Helsinki uses, and they're sort of the leader, Finland, and learning what they call phenomenological learning, like what's in front of me as a problem, what's in front of me and my place, my neighborhood that I can solve for, whether that's water or a food issue or whatever it might be, and being able to, in the moment, go, maybe I should learn about hydrology right now or learn about something else, but also the cycles of learning and work throughout life that didn't exist before. I might be learning about my next job while I'm in this job, or maybe this job, because of AI, gives me some new opportunity, and I can learn wherever I'm at. So that's the other. And the last piece from a school standpoint is learning beyond the school, yeah, but even on the school. Last week was Teacher Appreciation Week. I want to stretch that week to this week. We've got teachers in our system who are doing amazing things around augmented reality, doing projects that extend beyond the school. And we've got one of their teachers at an elementary school is teaching the students all about drones. And now imagine when the drones can fly a little further and chase those geese off the back 40, and the students can actually do some telemetry and learn about flight paths and engines and those sort of things. But because of 5G, they could track it much better in real time. All kinds of things. The teachers' imaginations can go further to find new ways of stretching learning, and the students can continue to succeed in the school.
Yeah, no, that's great to hear. And I think the idea of moving away from this, my kids are in online school right now, and moving away from just this one-dimensional, I'm looking at a chalkboard where somebody is writing something, or not, a whiteboard, I should say, and trying to get them to really be invigorated versus using the tools that are available in, either, the advancements of LTE or 5G, change that whole dynamic.
Right.
The learning process.
Yeah.
And thanks for sharing the Helsinki stuff. I did not know that. So let me ask if Chris or Ray had any comments on this about what the expectations as we move to 5G might be. Because
I was going to quickly add three, kind of building off of Phil and Jim's comments. And actually, I'm going to a demonstration tomorrow with drones and robotic dogs. And maybe that's where I'll start. My first one is that when you think about a smart city, smart campus, smart base, in the military, the ability to tie together a number of assets. So think from a safety standpoint, a security standpoint, a wireless infrared fence with digital video sitting on top of it. Maybe some radar drone detection going on there to look into the skies, where we're already seeing robotic dogs out on a number of the bases. It's really about, safety and security within those facilities. And 5G is going to allow us to put so much more capacity through. And it gets real interesting because you can start to compute at the edge and quickly dispatch people to take care of that. So while we're early in our smart cities we've been talking about and smart campuses, you've already had this proliferation of kind of sensors out there in the IoT world, and the ability to tie those together. It's not great if you have 5 of those and they all have their own interface and somebody's trying to look and figure out how do these things, you want them to be kind of seamless and fuse the information together. So that's first, right? I think this smart campus, smart city, smart base is ready to take off. Right, and there's all sorts of things that go into that. The other's kind of like that, but a little different in that it's really public safety outcomes, right? So when we talk about autonomous vehicles, right, the vehicles ultimately have to talk to each other and know each other's locations, and then they got to talk to infrastructure as well, right? And that's got to be pretty darn fast with low latency. And so really for that to take off, we want to see this 5G infrastructure fully in place out there to allow that. And it starts getting real interesting when you talk about pedestrians and bicycles in that, right, and tying the lighting together. So you're starting to get much more intelligent cities that are much safer, less deaths on our roadways and people walking across them, all that kind of good stuff. And then last one is one I think that, we've seen start to take off in the 4G world and it could be in the wireline world as well, is kind of intelligent video analytics. Right. But where my mind is with that, it's moved along, but I think there's a lot of opportunity in the food production space and in agriculture. We've done a great job in this country with precision agriculture, but we haven't gotten to that point where, the video off the drone actually shows blight on the crop, or if you're talking about our slaughterhouses and processing facilities that are out there, right? Those lines are generally manned by individuals for certain parts of time. And so, again, to have a more safe food supply, which is critically important, right, in the security chain of things, is the ability to use these intelligent video analytics at very high speed to adjust and find things in a much more efficient manner, right? And so, again, I think we're all talking about this, how bullish we are on so many different parts of our world and life. And the way I tie that back to our universities is that this is where, right, we're training people there in our vocational institutions, right? And then the military has their own schoolhouses and training facilities. But it's really how do we equip them and immerse them with this information to be able to produce these, these achievements that are coming at us so quickly.
Right. And Ray, what are your thoughts about, with your customers, and Nokia has a wide base of customers, obviously, but when you start to think about where we are with LTE today, the progress that we're making, even within LTE, but now the expectations on 5G and how that might relate to your customers, what are their expectations?
Well, definitely the first expectation we have is that, I'll go back to that CBR, is that it's 5G ready by Q4 or early next year, because they want higher bandwidth, they want lower latency. So they want all the promise of the 5G networks. And again, I deal mostly with private networks, so they want that in their bubble. And their expectation is it should be ready now, and easy to work with, understandable, not overly complex. That's the expectation they have. And I think the other one is the expectation is we don't know where we're going to use it yet beyond, the first few use cases. There's always I call them anchor use cases. The anchor use cases are the ones why they make the investments. And then once they have it, it's incredible to see the innovation that occurs. And on the educational field, I expect that as well, meaning, as they come up with ideas where previously they would say, well, that's not possible because I need an Ethernet port, or, the latency won't work. Now you're going to have all this innovation, and these ideas are going to come out because they'll have a playground. If they have a playground with it, which is a 5G connectivity layer at the university, or, even for what Dr. Neufeld was talking about, these kids that, were out of the broadband world, I think that's huge, because we're going to expand the amount of individuals and kids that are going to get to experience, learn, and just live in a different world. So I think what we're doing right now with addressing the digital divide, and then the campus deployments, I think are going to drive more and more innovation, because that's usually where a lot of the innovation comes from, is these university campus.
Yeah, and let me ask, and I think you brought up some good points, because you mentioned private networks, and we have two folks that are in charge of their school districts and university. Excuse me. So, Jim, when you look at what you're doing, are you partnering with the cellular industry? Did you consider private networks? Did you consider a hybrid? Did you consider network slicing? What did you think about?
For us, we are a feeder program for AT&T in particular. We have a really good relationship. We're one of the top 3 universities that feeds into their management program. And so we already had an established relationship with AT&T. And so that part was solved for us, at least at the outset. I think what's really interesting is to grow along with AT&T in answering some of the questions that both Ray and Chris just talked about, in terms of what is the richness of what a university provides, and how do we leverage the strengths of researchers and educational folks against the needs of private industry and of the public and whatever it might be. And so, for instance, when we go into the classroom this fall, we're going to bring engineering students and journalism students together, and we're going to create immersive stories in using AR, VR, MR, and we're going to have game engine developers on the back end, and we're going to create an end-to-end solution for our community, our 30,000 folks, that hopefully can be stamped elsewhere and can become a model for the mental health experiences of our students. And so the ability to put all of these interdisciplinary minds into one room and say, all right, have at it, figure out what your vernacular is, figure out what you speak different languages with different words. So let's knock through all that. And just as they do in business and industry, let's accelerate the future. Let's make this thing happen right here, right now, as it is emerging, which is hugely exciting, daunting, yes, but exciting to be a part of.
So for you already feel like, it sounds like, you had a partner already built in to what you were trying to accomplish. So when it came to building your own private network, it was, or anything, did you ever talk about network slicing with AT&T, or did at the time just decide, hey, we are so immersed that we can work with them hand in hand and develop what we need?
To be honest with you, we're already talking about putting a second wave on campus at our next gen medical facility. And then, athletics is already working with AT&T in terms of having the immersive experience at the football stadium and the basketball arena. And, I know the journalism school is really interested in incubating the future. And so we can imagine a world where each one of these has Wi-Fi 6 and has edge computing capabilities. And so we're thinking more of it from our logistical standpoint and our layout by bringing partners in from the university standpoint.
Right. Okay. I'm going to ask Dr. Neufeld the same question, and then I'm going to get some Q&A that we've been getting. So,
Sure.
Dr. Neufeld, when you were looking at, trying to basically bridge that digital divide, it sounded like,
Right.
Did you look at, how you're going to do that? And was it partnering with the cellular industry? Did you consider other options? What did you do?
Yeah, at that point, we needed to move fast. We realized what I call the connect to learn was broken, and so we had a connect to learn initiative that was addressing both the fiber in the ground. So we got dark leased fiber, so we got that capacity. But at that point, we went out to RFP for LTE using CBRS because that was what was available. Thank goodness for the sharing of spectrum. We didn't have to go license and go join in some FCC auction. And we had players like NetSync and using Nokia as the OEM who understand the importance of moving into this market and are willing to take a risk on working with the school district to build this out. We've got 15 sites, so basically 15 buildings as towers. And we're moving forward. I think there is very much a possibility of doing more of those partnerships as we move forward. I don't see the AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon folks coming with 5G being in competition. The more layers of access we have for our students, the better.
Okay, great. Okay, I'm going to move to some of the questions that we've been getting. And one of the first questions from the audience is, 5G is great, but I'm curious about how the companies are looking for performance monitoring. It seems like the organizations look at the end case, but how do you make sure that the service is available and that it's performing as expected and providing the customer the best experience that they expect? Philip, I think you mentioned it a little bit in your opening, maybe even what you developed something.
We just built a simple Windows app that we call a quality of connection app that will basically look to see what's upload, download latency like for this student. So we'll know that student either needs some support or that data can help us understand where we need to build next and or partner with someone to bring services.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I'll certainly add to that. I mean, that's our business, right, for AT&T. 5G, while it's, become mainstream in terms of, right, we said 240 million people are covered under our 5G rollout thus far. We invest $20 billion a year for the last, 8 years. I think it's the largest public investment in infrastructure in this country. So we're invested, and the systems work very, very well, right? We manage them every day. The advances in software-defined networking are extraordinary. The ability to use machine learning and artificial intelligence are part of a kind of a self-healing, resilient network. And, events do occur, and we have a lot of experience in, things from natural disasters to man-made events. And, I like to say we should probably add wireless to Maslow's hierarchy, because every time you see an event, the first thing people are looking for is power to charge their devices, because it's how they're connected in today's world. So it's got to go on the first tier there. And, we're going to continue to be more and more reliant on it. We're going to continue to make sure that we have, the systems in place to allow it to be ubiquitous and there when you need it. So the last thing I'll say, I'm in the Shenandoah Valley. I don't have the luxury of having an ISP, an internet service provider here. No cable companies, no nothing here to the farm on the river. And I'm all cellular. And I don't think I've froze yet. I'm just kidding. That was you.
You're looking crystal clear. You're an advertisement for the cellular industry right there. What are you farming there? You said in the farm.
We have some longhorn cattle on the property here. It's in Virginia, of all places, and pretty much foraging for them.
All right. All right, you're signal handling, bridging that digital divide wherever you are in the farm. We have another question, and I'm going to make whoever wants to answer it, maybe Ray. We have a question actually about when you start to look at these broader institutions and connecting up IoT and all the different devices. Where does security lay? Is it at the is it with the device? Is it with the core, or is it in the RAN, or is it in all three places? Where does?
So yes, and yes.
Oh yeah,
that's the answer. It's yes. I mean, that's the reality. When you look at it, this is a Nokia view that you have to look at security holistically. It's how you act. It's at the device level, even at the application level of the device, the firmware, the encryption, using SIM technology if you can, and then once it enters the IP, the IP networking side, each layer has different, security defense systems. But the one thing we have found mostly in regards to security, it's the process of how an enterprise looks at their security and that they implement, safeguards at each layer. And that's the magic of security. I think anybody in the industry that's been involved knows that it's having the right processes and at each layer implementing, as much as you can. The reality is there's a cost involved in a lot of times in security, in that you can make a network from the IoT device to the other end, perfectly secure, but you also want to be able to stay in business. So there's a balance between processes, applications, and then applying those security measures.
I'll add one thing to Ray's point is in the public square, it's a very porous network. People bring things in the public square, and so to Ray's point, you have to pay attention to all those layers because you don't know what's going to show up where, and you've got to be able to defend against those things. Yeah,
that's true. I mean, and a plug for 5G Americas, we got 2 or 3 security papers for the mobile wireless industry that's on our website, free. You can download them, and they're great reads if you have a Friday night or something like that. Next question is specific for AT&T. It says, when you start to look at the campus environment, is the focus more on the network edge, the core network, or maybe just the services? Where do you look at it from what viewpoint?
All of the above.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that.
What's interesting is that you can certainly haul all this information back across the network to wherever you may have, legacy data centers, you may have cloud-based providers, or you can keep stuff at the edge, right? We talked a little bit about multi-access edge compute earlier, right? And the ability to have this commodity compute stack, your own little cloud at the edge, secure the heck out of that, right? Put your applications on there, everything you're doing. And you touched on network slicing earlier, right? An interesting component with this is not only that information that you've got at the campus that you want to maybe maintain there, right? You can separate that and not have it go out beyond that node, but you can also slice up portions of the network and put different workloads on there, right? For quality and performance, for security. So that's kind of the first point, right? And then there's the next point, which is, in the infrastructure in a mobile network, right? We still have central offices and mobile data centers, what we call, so beyond the MEC, right, which sits on the premise of the campus. You've got NEC, which is a network edge compute node, right, where you can have an Azure stack, you could use AWS, right, but they're co-located then with the kind of the core network, if you will, right, and that gives you another layer of, hey, how far do I want to carry this information away? Maybe you've got a metropolitan area network with a bunch of schools working together across a school district, or so on and so forth, and then you can go all the way back to the core. So they all work in tandem, and really what allows this is software-defined networking today, right? For you to be able to kind of configure that. And we work very closely with our clients based on their use case, their customers, to figure out where the right places are for the different parts of the kind of data equation here, if you will, and information.
A question for Jim.
And if I can.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Sorry, just wanted to, I guess, give a plug into AT&T here. Most people don't realize this, but AT&T's portfolio goes all the way from, your commercial public network all the way to a private network. They also offer either just at the mobile edge compute platform, or if you want to buy your own RAN, or if you want your own private network, AT&T's portfolio extends the whole breadth. So I think that's one thing I like about how AT&T and other carriers are looking at it. They don't look at private LTE or public or slice or edge as being competing technologies. They're looking at it going, Mr. Customer, what is your needs? Based on your needs, here's what fits your portfolio, what fits what in my portfolio fits your needs. And I think we have to start looking at that. And I think that's an evolution that, even 5G has brought, is that the fact that it can't be seen as, people are looking at it as a technology enabler that fits different models.
Right. Question for Jim. Will the post-COVID-19 learning environment or remote learning environment look different with 5G? It's kind of like a question about post-COVID learning and with 5G being deployed. Will it look different? Will it continue? People talk about this in the work side, right? Like, all the companies are going to go hybrid or allow remote work sometimes. Will the campuses be some type of different learning?
Well, if students are any indicator, they want a combination. So they want some of what COVID has forced us into, which is a remote learning environment where they don't have to get up and go to class in the morning. They can simply dial into the classroom. But then increasingly, at least what I found with my students, that's anecdotal, but I think we've seen it across the industry, is people see value in being in the same room. So I think what we're going to do is we're going to take the best of what's happened to education in COVID, which is that we all had to go to our corners and stay there for a while. And we're going to come back into a room, but we're going to be smarter as the result of it. And it is my belief, and I'm just one person, but it is my belief that we will leverage the best of what we've learned in COVID, especially as regards remote and distance learning. And we will put that against what we're doing in person, and will emerge better as the result.
Great. Dr. Neufeld, any thoughts on post-COVID-19 learning environment and 5G?
Yeah, I think students, will learn more beyond the school. Teachers will use signals about what's happening beyond the classroom, and that will be partly informed by those 5G and LTE connections. And using that data, we can also then, with big data, do analytics around, okay, what do we do next for that student? How do we inform the teacher about their right next move? And I know students, and they've been doing this for a while, have reimagined what their learning experiences can be like. And teachers in this moment, a lot of them, to Jim's point, have really stretched their imagination. And as educational leaders and policymakers, the question is, how do we get rid of the constraints that block that imagination? Because the future is definitely, the next normal is definitely going to be different, and I think better.
Right. A quick question for AT&T is, are you using network slicing currently to provide different quality of service or customer service applications? Have you started to implement network slicing to do something like that or not?
It's really driven by the customer, right? And where I see it taking place, for instance, I'll use a campus, and the professors here can correct me if they don't see it this way. But, for instance, I'll use the quad example, right? You may have some R&D going on in a quad area that's covered, and you want that to remain separate and intact from, let's call it the entertainment stream, right? Where you've got a more open network and people are doing kind of AR, VR, with the media side of things. And then you may have information systems that are, kind of germane to the school grades, personal information, those types of things. That's a good use case with three different flavors of how they might use that wireless spectrum within that facility, right? And you got to add the Wi-Fi 6 into this. You got to add the macro network and really architect this. That's what we've spent a lot of time with our customers doing is, hey, what are the use cases? Where do you want to start? How do we start to lay this out?
Right. All right. Time has just been flying by. I just want to give really the two folks where the rubber meets the road, Professor Flink and Dr. Neufeld, 30 seconds to 60 seconds. Any final thoughts about where we're going in the industry and how it affects what you're doing? And any final thoughts, 60 seconds or less? We'll start with Jim.
Okay, I think that we have entered into a new phase of accelerated learning, and we have to skate where the puck's going because it's coming at us really, really fast. And so for me, we are a little bit out front of where the technology is, but not much, but it's about to blow by us and we better be ready. We better have our hats on and we better be ready to move and be nimble.
Awesome. Dr. Neufeld, final comments in 60 seconds or less about how the industry is moving forward and how it affects you. You're on mute. Dr. Neufeld, you're on mute.
How I run it. I think that what's opened up with students be able to learn beyond the school and learn differently in the classroom, teachers imagining how they might do their work differently, the data signals that we're getting that can create intelligence around learner pathways, the future is completely open. It's going to be wonderful.
Awesome. Great. On behalf of 5G Americas and all that are in the audience listening to this and will be listening to this in the recording, I'd like to thank Professor Jim Flink, Dr. Philip Neufeld, Chris Smith of AT&T, and Ray Soberin of Nokia. You guys have done just a fantastic job today. I really appreciate it. Also, just to let everyone know, if you want to let your folks know or friends or colleagues, we will have a recording, and so you'll get more information on our website, 5gamericas.org, and you'll also get white papers that are free to download about many of the topics that we just talked about during this great panel. So again, a big thanks to all the panelists and everyone involved, and just to everyone in the world. Stay safe, stay healthy, and keep using that wireless communication. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks.